Hello and welcome back to Visual Analytics, module number 3. Today we're going to do quite a lot. We're going to cover quite a lot of information and I hope it will make more sense. I'll try to be clear as much as I can and I will try to review the homework assignment and introduce you what is going to be your next assignment using Adobe Illustrator. You're going to receive from me a page where you're going to see where you can get supporting cast to Adobe Illustrator and what is available. One of the things that it is available for you is ability to run the Adobe Illustrator from your computer or from the browser. It's sometimes not convenient, but again, if this is the only option, that might be the best way. Another great resource that I highly recommend that you start using is lynda.com. Lynda.com started to become famous or become popular when they started to teach the subject of Adobe Suite, and in particular Illustrator. So I think this is a good way for you to understand what is it entail and what Lynda can offer with regard to the subject of Illustrator. So we will start working today on Illustrator. It's not going to be concise, it's not going to be precise, but it's going to be just give you some ideas of Adobe Illustrator. We are going to go over again a new chapter, chapter 5 in our textbook, and we are going to talk about what is it entail when we are looking at different aspects of visual analytics and how we apply that. Example, the details on demand, over plotting, reduction, and things like that, which are important, and I want to go over that because I feel in the end of the day, you will run into it in some form, in some way. So, but before I will start talking about his classification and how he look at things, I want to continue our collection of terminology so we will have better understand what it entails. So I will talk about qualitative and quantitative. I will talk about statistics, and I will talk specifically today about descriptive statistics. So there are three types of research methodology. When I'm talking methodology, research methodology is the ideas of how we collected data. And so there are three methodologies, usually in social science, that consider to be scientific methodology in order for us to find new knowledge. And the idea is, how do we do that? So quantitative methodology and qualitative methodologies are the ones who are most popular, especially in other fields such as engineering, math and statistics, and so on. And there is also mixed messages that combine them together. So qualitative research, it focuses on making sense or provide interpretation to social or human phenomena or experience or behavior, something that we cannot generate about the entire population, but we can observe it directly through interaction. So the phenomena are studied in the natural setting. So we need to go out of our room and go observe, like example, cats or humans or any other things that we would like to study. So it's going to be something that we have a personal touch to it. The investigation is provide to have better meaning how people brings to this phenomena. And the idea here is that the research is the instrument of the data collection. So what you see, what you write on the observation is part of how you collect the data. So it's usually we are using descriptive data in order for us to describe what we have seen. So the research is, we are talking about how versus how many. We are talking about inductive in an open process, and we are talking about how can we describe the process instead of actually manually try to give it a value in order for us to qualify it? So the idea here is that we use different methodologies, and I lay out for you some of the methodology. Example, grounded theory. We are developing, while we're observing, we are developing a theory, and this theory should provide us explanation. Example, I have a cat. Every day the cat do the same thing, but there's days that she goes crazy, and so those crazy days I can create my own grounded theory based on my observation of my cat, and I will be able to say what she does is unique and report on that in scientific journals. In comparison, the other type of research is based on amount, based on frequency, based on degrees, and based on values. And the idea here is to be as precise and objective as possible. We are not talking about the human touch anymore. We are not talking personal observation. We are talking about deductive model in order for us to get away from our own personal experiment or understanding of the subject, and to be ability to analyze the data as it is without our interference with the data. So the overall purpose of the objective is to come up with methodology to measure that, and we need to come up with validity and reliability methodology to verify that what we observe is actually valid. So the idea here is that we have exploratory and descriptive, casual, and we have the idea of how we can elaborate and be able to see what does it entail. So the idea here is, again, we have measurement fundamentals, which is how we measure things, how we apply those things. We have the speed, the distance, the value, the weight, the size, and all of it has to come up in our report. And so if I would do the assumption between those two paradigms, the qualitative is basically socially constructed. In comparison, the quantitative is basically facts that we observe, collect, and we can give it to another person to do the same observation as we do, because we do not input or do not provide our own interpretation to the data, something that is really important. So again, I lay out for you the foundation or the paradigm of those two approaches, and you probably asked me, so what about statistics? The idea here is that statistics is about a group of methods that used to collect, analyze, present, and provide interpretation to the data to help making better decisions. So why do we need to analyze? Is to evaluate user compliances, to assess alternative course of action, and to measure that in order for us to do that. There's two branches of statistics that usually we learn in class: descriptive and inferential. I add another dimension. I add the predictive and this modeling, which is the idea of what is to outline a model that is best fit for us to predict about the future or about the outcome. Predictive modeling became popular in the last 10 years, and that's why in most statistical textbook we do not talk about predictive modeling as a paradigm. We're talking as alternative. So this is the difference, and that's why I said we need to see how we visualize it and how can we make sense out of it. In descriptive statistics, as I said before, we are about collecting and presenting and provide some generalization about the data. Inferential, we are taking a sample out of the population and make a and based on it, we're writing hypotheses that we are testing in order to validate our result. Example of that, as you saw that in the election when we talked about who is going to be the next president, even though the result was not there, and they made up based on hypothesis how they test the sample versus the population in order for you to do that. So the statistics we have in this class, in this module, we are going to talk about descriptive statistics, about collecting, organizing, summarizing, and presenting the data. In future module, we are going to talk about inferential statistics, how we are making inference, how we writing hypotheses, how we determining relationship, and how we making predictions. And in predictive modeling, we will talk about what is a model, how do we create or generate a model by ourselves, what is machine learning, and what is advanced algorithm. But we also, again, I'm going back because I don't know your background, I'm going back to basic definitions. In statistics and any type of statistical analysis, we are talking about measuring. It is a key statistical research terminology because it shows the relation between the data and what we observed, and the population versus the sample. And I think this is a good example of illustration, of visual illustration between the population and the sample. The population is the entire population. Example, when we go to vote is usually the entire population, and nowadays every month they're going to take a sample to show how popular is our president. This is a sample, it's not the population. What counts in the end of the day is the entire population, but a sample is a way for us to predict about the population. So the population consists of all the elements in this type of group, individual items or object that we are trying to study. The sample is taking a process or characteristics from this population and not select all of them, but only separate or only element of that in order for us to do that. The reason for drawing a sample is first of all, it's less time consuming, it less cost, and it allows us to do what is going on in the population and not waiting for the entire population to vote or to go out and express their opinion. There's two types of samples, non-probability and probability. I will go very fast on them, and because the non-probability is really for easy access versus probability is more constrained and has to be justify what we are doing. So in probability sample, we are going to talk about simple, random, stratified, and cluster, and systematic, and what do they do. But we also need to talk about the data sources that we have. We have secondary data and we have primary data. Data, when we are talking of first stage of data, we are talking about observation, we are talking about survey, and we are talking about experimental. We are taking, for example, when a drug company wants to test a new drug, they do experiment. They ask for volunteers, they put them in a lab, closed lab, they give them the medicine and see the reaction of it. This is experiment. In comparison, in a secondary, it's all about data manipulation. When you see a study that's done on Twitters and how many people tweet the latest tweet by the president, this is a manipulation of the data. It's not a first hand, it's not observation, it's not a survey. We are not asking for opinion, we are taking the data and manipulating it in order for us to come up with a result. When we are talking about data, we also need to remember that there is type of data. We have categorical data versus numerical data. Categorical data is usually about the category inside the data. When a survey asks you about are you married or not, or what is your political party identification, they are categorizing the data based on your answer. Numerical data usually divided into two types: discrete versus continuous. Discrete is when they're asking number of children you have, or how many sisters and brothers do you have. Continuous, it can be your weight. This year I gained some weight, but last year I lost some weight. So it's ongoing process, and that's the difference between the type of data that we will encounter when we will start using data to visualize it and to have a visual analytics out of it. So the level of the measurements with that regard to categorical and numerical, we have the lowest level is numerical data, which is the lowest. It's category, but there is no direction or ordering what is the highest, what is the lowest. And the highest ranking of the data is ratio data. It's the difference between the measurements true, zero exist, and this is the highest level. We will come back to it throughout the semester. The most used terms in any statistical textbooks, and I want you to remember that, is the idea of a variable. Example: male versus female, age, income, education. Those are variables that we like to use in order to us to see if there is difference between male and female, age or income, or education versus income. Those are the variables that we are like to collect in order for us to do that. A data set is a collection of observation on one or more variables, and I want you to have that in your back of your head because we are going to do that. So I hope that will give you inspiration that you are ready for data analysis. When we are talking about data analysis, we need to start talking about descriptive statistics. This is the foundation of statistics. Even in the two paradigms that I described beforehand, descriptive statistics is often used in order for us to do that. Why? Because it gives us the idea of describing what we have done and give us measurements to tools in order to report what we have seen. We are going to talk about central tendency and what does it mean. And in central tendency, I'm sure that you are all familiar with it, is the mean. And it is what it consists of is the sample size, the observed value, and it gives us the mean. And the calculation is quite simple. You add all the values, you divide it by the number of observation, and you get to the mean. And you can see, even though sometimes the data set might be equal number of observation, the value are different, and as a result, the mean will be different. And this is really important. In comparison to the mean, the median is the middle number in the data set. Example, the median number can be 3 and it can be also 3. So no extreme the median does not affected by extreme values. How do we find the median? N plus 1 divided by 2. It's not the value of the median, but the position in the data set that allowed us to do that. Mode is where the most value that occurs. In this example, in below is 9 is the mode, and in the second set there is no mode because there is no most affected values in the extreme. Why are we using descriptive statistics? Example, you are planning to buy a house, which is great. You go around the neighborhood you like and you collect all the prices of available house for sale, and you do some ideas of how the prices of the houses range with regard to the mean, medium, and mode. So the example in this case, the mean in this case is $600,000. The medium is different because this is the middle value of the ranked data, and the mode is the most frequent data. Those values give us some sense what's going on with the house market. So which measurement of location is the best? Mean is generally used unless extreme value exists. The medium is also often used since it's not sensitive to extreme values. The mean, geometric mean, is more precise, and we will see about that later on when we will start using open source R. Another way for us to qualify the data is called quartiles. And quartiles take the entire set and divide it into 4 equal segments of the data set. So example, quartile 1 is equal to 25% of all observation, and it's smaller than the 75% of all the observation. And we used that again to synchronize or to see where we are at with regard to that. Quartiles formula is usually consists of Q1 is equal n plus 1 divided by 4, and Q3 is equal n plus 1 multiplied by 3 divided by 4, and it gives us the idea what is it entail. So again, quartile 1, find the first quartile, and this is what it gives us, and it gives us a range of how we apply that. Another way for us to measure descriptive statistics is the idea of standard deviation or variance or range, and those are the things that we are going to apply when we are starting to analyze large data. Why? Because the descriptive statistics help us to see what is the data entail. The range is the smallest number minus largest number minus the smallest number, and usually the disadvantage of the range is that ignore the way in which the data are distributed in the data set, and this is why. Interquartile range is taking quartile 3 minus quartile 1 will give us more precise way when we are talking about the data set and how we apply. The variance is part of how we are looking at the standard deviation, and the variance is the average of square deviation of the value of the mean, and this is the formula. The standard deviation is the most commonly used measurement of variance, and it shows the variation about the mean. It has the same unit as the original data. The simple formula of standard deviation as follows. And if we compare standard deviation, we might find, even though the 3 data sets have different value, the standard deviation might have a better sense. Even though the mean is equal in all of them, the standard deviation gives us a better description or better understanding where it stands out. The advantage of the standard deviation that it examines each set in the value in the calculation, and the value far from the mean are giving extra weight. Back to our book and back to visual analytics, because we are going to use that as a way for us to sort the data and to organize it. We are going to talk about optimization, we are going to talk about reference lines and religion, and we are going to talk about overplotting and details on demands. Okay, so let's start with the basic. Arranging scale to organize the data. And this can be done in different ways. For example, arranging data from the lowest value to the highest. And again, back to descriptive statistics, this is what mode all about. Basically, he took the idea of the mode and applied it and gave it a scale name. So the idea here is, in 2014, the Department of Transportation report on the following motorcycle nationwide location. proper helmet, insufficient helmet, and no helmet at all. So the idea that if we sort it out, it's a 1,700 helmet altogether that the study examined. If we are going to show that in a graph, it's going to show that no helmet was the most popular platform that according to the study, and insufficient was lower below. If we will talk about categorical variables on a vertical bar X, the variable is normally called categorical, and in this case the helmet type. And so is it discrete or continuous? And again, on the vertical, the X variable is normally a categorical variable. And again, this is what you need to show when we are trying to do that. When we are talking about bar graph, it's recommended to use on the x-axis the categorical element in order for us to make it more coherent, more concise, and where people will understand it. So again, categorical and how to apply that. Making the bar graph look better. How would we make the graph look better? If we rank the number of by either increasing or decreasing value, the appropriate would be less judge, making a histograph, and I will talk about that later on in module number 4. But now I would recommend that you will go over the chapter number 5 in this textbook and go over what he recommends, and I will talk about his recommendation in next module. I want now to go I would like to go now to the second subject of the class, and it is the basic vector graphics. We are going to enter a new dimension, and the new dimension is what is vector. A vector is a pair of directions and ability to have an arrow that will give us directions what is going to happen. In statistics, we use multiple of vectors. We apply that in different application. I'm not going to talk about the statistical element of it, but I will go over it very fast. So the general real number of C, we can multiply the vector by C by multiplying it by multitude by S. So by C, sorry. And so the idea here is that it gives us directions to the data set itself. We have laws that apply to the vector, and we have a combination that allowed us to give better sense of the data flow and what is it stands for, and the components of the vector where it shows and what is the dimension between them. And those are the things that we are often use in scientific visualization and apply that into the idea of what is it instead and how to apply that and how to produce them. In graphics or computer graphics, we are talking about in graphics we have two types of graphics. We have vector and we have raster. The idea of vector graphics is usually the graphics that are based on mathematical formula that defines the lines, the shape, and the curves. And they are composed of paths connected to the arc points, which means that they are attached to one another. And they can be in 2D or 3D, and they can edit by the idea. So the idea of vector graphics is the archer point, the path, and the shape that allows us to apply that. Example, the original image, the resized image, and the shape that makes up the image. And by doing that, we are able to add dimension to our visual illustration. The use of the vector graphics will be scale and can be reduced, something that is very accessible. And so we are usually doing vector graphics in CAD programs and flowchart. And it is usually when we are creating logos, we like to scale them or resize them without losing the quality of the logo. And that's why vector graphics is so popular to do that. It allows us in illustration and clips art to do that, and in graphics on a website also is quite. PowerPoint is part of the example that usually we apply. So the advantage of vector, it's scalable. We are able to reduce or to scale it back. It is ability to edit and to make up things on it and be able to have full size files as easily transformed over the internet. The advantage is lower color quality than raster images, which is again part of our discussion that we will have later on in this class. So they do not support many colors as they should be, and they are not good for photographic images. They have limited type of effects that can be applied, and one of the most famous application that we will learn today is Adobe Illustrator. Has naive file format, which is Adobe Illustrator. It has a standard industry standard for developers, and it used to create, save, and archive original artwork. So it has the idea of how the file works and how we can comply that in order for us to save it. I talked about here the file format, and I want to go now to start talking about what does it entail. In last example, in the homework assignment, I gave you the example of using Google Fusion table and to search for a database. In my keywords, I said public library in Florida, and it shows me list of tables, and I was able to add it to a Fusion table that produces the following tables. And in this table, I was able to edit the columns, and in order for me to say the location, and the location was the way for me to convert this table in order for me to produce the following map. So this is the map that I was asking you to create for last assignment, for assignment number 2. I ask you to save the file. I usually capture the file. You can have other form depending what type of computer you have. And now when you going to use Adobe Illustrator, and again I posted some ideas of how to apply that. You can have the Adobe Creative Cloud for free. If you will send it, I will send you the email you will send, and you will receive the Adobe Cloud for free in 5 days. Or again, there is other resource, as I showed you before, that you can apply that for free in the university system. If you have that, if you don't succeed, the library has the ability to do that. And what I want you to do is add the dimension of vector into this example. Because the Fusion table does not allow us to add elements into the visualization itself, I can add here text. Example text. This is my example of Google Fusion table. And Adobe Illustrator. So I can have more precise way for me to add things that are important for me to make my visual more transparent, more coherent when you as my students my peers or anyone else be able to see what I have done, to give it a title, to give it some directions. What is it that we are trying to capture? In this case, public library. I created small icon. I fill it up with a color, and I can fill this line with background in order for it to be more transparent, and you will see all the example and all the videos that are available for you to create that yourself. So I want you to work on your Google Fusion table that you had in your second assignment, and to make it more transparent, to have a title, to have some labels that you are index that will be able to better understand what is your visual represent, and we will continue to develop it and we'll continue to work on it. So until next time, I know it takes a long time to watch this video. It's a long video, so I'm cutting short. I hope that makes sense. Last issue that I need to talk about is your quiz. Your quiz is based on module 1 and module number 2. I did not talk about anything else. Just remember, the quiz is not only for you, it's also for me. I need to understand your vocabulary. I need to understand what the things that I was saying and trying to present to you were clear or not clear, and based on it I will be able to improve my communication with you, and you will show me what you understand and what is not. So the quiz, do not panic. It's not the end of the world. It's just for me to start the conversation, to have better vocabulary with you in order for you to have better understanding of visual analytics. Until next time, if you do have a question, please do not hesitate to come and see me or email me or Skype with me. Until next time, have fun.